Great. Well, I want to welcome everyone today. This is our first fireside chat of the year. And in thinking about this kind of presentation, I thought it might be great for the school to have a chance to have informal conversations about works in progress, new ideas, and really get to know each other's work better. So I want to thank Trina Shanks, the Harold R. Johnson Collegiate Professor, for being our first fireside chat leader. And I know Trina doesn't need an introduction for many of you, but I will say just a few things. In addition to the collegiate professorship, Trina holds several important roles in the school. She is the director of our school-wide community engagement initiative, which is one of our 5 strategic goals for the School of Social Work in our strategic plan. And she's been at the helm of that initiative for almost 2 years now, Trina, coming upon 2 years. Just this last year, just in the last several months, Trina has launched the Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing. And the goal of that new center in our school is to encourage and support win-win efforts that connect the resources and intellectual strength of the University of Michigan with the passion and social capital of community leaders, and specifically in Detroit. And the distinctive element of the Center for Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing is that the agenda is going to be family and community driven. And in Detroit, that is a true distinction and very much needed. Trina's research interests include the impact of poverty and wealth on child well-being. She studies asset policy, community and economic development. She's been engaged with the long-term SEED project, Saving for Education, Entrepreneurship, and Down Payment. And she was one of the leading faculty in the Skillman Foundation funded Good Neighbors program. So Trina comes to us today with a long and distinguished history in leading community-based initiatives in Detroit. So with no further ado, I'll turn the podium over to Trina.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And thank you for those who've come today and those who might be listening to this in the future. I think that community engagement has been a part of our school for a long time. And so this is really just a chance to really introduce the Engage team to you and the work that we've been doing over the last few months, because people ask all the time, what is Engage? What does it mean? And so this is a chance to start the conversation, let you know what we've been doing, but also hear what you're interested in. So everyone will introduce themselves along the way, but I will quickly introduce the Engage team. It's Sonia Harb, if you want to wave, Aisha Ghazi, Fatima Salman, and we have 2 wonderful interns, Jamie Simmons and Blake Newman. And so you'll get a chance to hear from each of them through the presentation today. And if you want to start the slides, Fatima, that would be awesome. So really, I'm welcoming you to our conversation about engagement. We're going to have some icebreakers really quick just to get everybody ready, talking and engaging. We're going to talk about the strategic goal around community engagement that Dean talked about, share a little bit about our work, and then we want to hear from you about what you like about what we're doing and what you'd like to see happen in the future. Then maybe a little bit about next steps and a conclusion. Next slide, please. Oh, now I'm going to turn it over to our interns who are going to go through the icebreaker with you. So Blake and Jamie.
Hi, everyone. So we are going to be using the annotate feature for this icebreaker. So I'm not sure. You can go up to.
I can explain it if you want, Blake.
Yeah, go ahead. That would be great.
So if everybody goes up your toolbar, and if you notice that there is, you'll have a whole bunch of little icons: mute, stop video, security, participants, and so forth. But if you click the annotate button, go ahead and click the annotate button. And then after that, click the stamp button. It's a little check mark. and choose the stamp that you want to represent your answer. And Blake, we'll head it over to you to ask the questions and we can start answering them.
Yes. So after you have selected your stamp, we will go through these questions. So the first one is, how many of you have had dinner with friends or family over Zoom? And then the second one is, how many of you have had pets join your Zoom call? And then next is, how many of you have ran out of toilet paper during all of the stuff that happened? And then next slide.
That was a lot of running out of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Here we go. Oops, let's get out of annotate. And there we go.
And then Jamie, if you want to take over for this slide.
Yeah, for this slide, and once again, use the annotated feature to participate. How many of you have stayed in your pajamas for 1 day or longer? Or how many of you have on pajama bottoms right now?
No shame.
How many of you accidentally increased your caffeine consumption while being at home?
Maybe on purpose.
Yes, 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 yes. That's an affirmative.
And please raise your hand if you consider yourself a Zoom pro or use your annotated feature to.
I'm becoming better, that's for sure.
Trying, but it's agony.
We all have new things to put on our resumes.
Right. We learn something new every day for sure. And then next slide.
Let me
Oh yeah,
clear.
clear.
Yep, here we go.
Raise your hand if you have gone a week or longer without leaving your house.
For sure.
How many of you have binge watched more shows than before quarantine? And then the last one, how many of you have had your internet/computer fail you during an important meeting?
Oh my God, yes.
Repeatedly.
It's a rite of passage, I think.
Right. Thank you all for participating in our icebreaker.
And Blake came up with these wonderful ideas. So thank you, Blake and Jamie, for helping with this portion. Next slide, please. So as the dean mentioned, as soon as she came, she put us right to work on a strategic plan. And the fourth goal was engaging with local, regional, national, and global communities to advance social justice and create progressive change. And as you'll see in objective 2, 3, and 4, there were already many things going on in the school with the program evaluation group, with the Office of Global Activities, with the Office of Student Services. But I was asked, and eventually the engaged team that came along with me, to actually create and implement kind of a research practice service agenda for the school, and maybe think about what our school's approach to public scholarship was going to be, starting with Detroit, and then maybe thinking about other areas. So that's really what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today, and then also tell you about where it's gone from when the strategic plan was first done in 2017. Next slide, please. Really, our purpose is to try to concentrate and connect all the things that schools already been doing, and also try to pull together the ability and resources to reach this goal of greater equity and social change. And we went through a little strategic planning process amongst our team, and we really like this word solutionaries, this idea of connecting and empowering people. And it's not just about problem solving in itself, but it's actually engaging and bringing energy and strategy in a way that you do your best thinking to solve problems and address inequities and move toward social change in a positive direction. And so we may not always be the one to do the work, but if nothing else, we try to connect people who are doing it, or empowering people to do more, or to make sure that the best ideas could come to bear to move in a positive direction. So this idea of being solutionaries is kind of a thought that we're bringing to this engagement work. Next slide, please. And so when we thought about our goals, this idea of uplifting current community engagement at the school and facilitate more and intentional engagement. And the way I've kind of talked about is that where we have nodes of strength, either lots of people are doing work in a particular area, whether it's a geographic area or a topical area, make sure they know about one another and maybe can work together, or at least the fact that there's much work going on in an area can be elevated so that everyone else can be aware of our nodes of strength. This idea of coordinating community engagement efforts across units, centers, and courses, both within the School of Social Work and across the university. And really one of the big things, just to give an example of this, we don't have to do training around community engagement because the Office of Academic Innovation and the university as a whole is going to have a public engagement fellows. So we can announce and make sure that we promote and connect people to that effort rather than us doing all the training ourselves. There's so much going on around voting right now. So we had our webinar on voting, but then we can also point people to what Justin Hodge is doing at the school, what Ginsburg is doing at the school, what the democracy cafes that Angela Dillard and her team are doing. So it's not that we have to do all the work, but that we can actually connect pieces and make sure there's some coordination about the things that are happening across campus as well as within the school. And then finally, this idea of facilitating community impact, what we're calling signature projects, new initiatives, and particularly around social justice. And one way, we're going to talk about a lot of things we're doing going forward, but really just to let people know that in addition to uplifting what's currently happening and coordinating across different people, we also are open to new ideas and kind of things that might be signature initiatives for the school. Next slide, please. And so as we thought about our role in the school, and this is what we want feedback on, because this is what we're thinking, but it can always change if there's new ideas, maybe provide an organizing framework for all the school's engagement effort, and actually lift the profile of what's happening in good work and coordinating for greater impact. And really the real point here is we're here to help the students and faculty and staff of the school in whatever ways that we can do that. So providing the framework, this idea of rapidly responding during times of crisis, or maybe bringing issues of equity and social justice to the forefront when things are happening at the school, and actually providing an outlet for students and maybe faculty and staff if they want to do things but they don't know how, kind of where can we bring people together and rapidly respond. And one example of that is what we did this summer, working with field office around volunteer activities, doing immediate social isolation and going remote as a school, and how can we help people get field credits for that. We also want to take the relationships that we have as individuals with the community and the trusted relationships that we've built and actually connect it to others at the school, so that we can actually meet the needs of community partners as well as the desire for the school and for faculty and for students to help and be and contribute. We want to be flexible and nimble to adapt our activities to things that are going to align with what the greater school is doing. And really, we'll give examples of that, but again, it's not just what we're doing, but also making sure we're adjusting to be responsive to align with other things that are going on. And then again, this idea of taking the engagement and equity efforts that are going on across campus, and then making sure that we can broaden our reach, but helping people not to duplicate efforts. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we see as our role as being, but I will pass it on to Sonia, who's going to talk a little bit about some key timelines and things that we've done in the relatively recent past as well as historically. So Sonia, I'm passing it on to you. Next slide.
Thanks, Trina. So this timeline represents the activities that Engage has been involved in since we've been appointed to do this work, but also it speaks to some of the work that predated the engagement goal for the School of Social Work. Now, we're going to put a link to this timeline in the chat because it's small and I'm sure you can't read it. And I'll be highlighting some of the key milestones in our work. So next slide. So like I mentioned, and like Trina referenced and the Dean also spoke to, in 2006, the School of Social Work supported the Skillman Good Neighborhood Initiative and was a close partner to the Skillman Foundation in implementing this work. And at that time, a center was established called the Technical Assistance Center. So that work continued for a 10-year period of time. In 2017, we had our strategic plan set for the school that outlined the engagement goal. In 2018, we hosted the Detroit Capacity Building Forum, and that was an outgrowth of our capacity building work that we did with leaders in Detroit neighborhoods through the Skillman Initiative. And what we did there was we convened stakeholders from around the city of Detroit that care about nonprofit capacity building and building the capacity of grassroots leaders in neighborhoods. And we convened them to work as a collective to improve the capacity building ecosystem in Detroit. In August of 2018, Trina was appointed the Engage Director. So you can kind of see the sequence of events. Things were happening before we engaged in this work in earnest for the school. In 2019, at the beginning of the year, we launched our inaugural small grant award program, and that was exciting, where we issued, and we let requests for proposals, and we issued small grants to faculty to incentivize their engagement in community and partnership building with community-based organizations and leaders. That year, that month, I was also appointed Detroit Engagement Advisor for the Office of the Provost. In March of 2019, we worked collaboratively, Trina and I worked collaboratively with COACT and the Michigan Nonprofit Association and a number of other organizations in Detroit to develop the Building a Network report, which provided a framework and a set of expectations and guiding principles to support the capacity building ecosystem and network in Detroit. And that, again, built on our capacity building forum. And it was kind of like a culmination of our work supporting capacity building in Detroit neighborhoods and nonprofit organizations. In 2019, we also, Trina and I engaged with the Provost Detroit Advisory Group. At the time, the Provost appointed a group to support and kind of lead and guide the university's presence in the city of Detroit. So both Trina and I were engaged in that work at the Provost office level. In August, we were fortunate enough to have Kellogg support our work and become a funding partner to our engagement efforts in the city. In October, our Engage team initiated an inventory project where we were trying to catalog and organize all of the engagement activity of the faculty of the School of Social Work. In December, we did more community-based work, and we convened through the Kellogg grant and partnership, we convened the Employment Equity Learning Community in the city. And that, again, is another collective impact model where we pulled a number of different, over 45 different stakeholders across the city of Detroit together to work on promoting greater employment equity in the city. We also collaborated with COACT Detroit, which was established by the Wilson Foundation to support capacity building in the city for nonprofit organizations. And we supported the establishment and the development of their Activate Fund, which was intended to fund grassroots groups and community-based organizations to build their capacity and be more effective at change making in their communities. The Engage team launched our website, and you've probably seen it, the community engagement website for the School of Social Work. And our Engage team launched and hosted our first student showcase in Detroit, which was incredibly exciting. And it was high energy. We had some community partners, and we had a number of students showcasing and highlighting their engagement work in the city of Detroit. And what was interesting about that is that we very purposefully collaborated with the Office of Field Education in developing and hosting and implementing that showcase. In 2020, this year, we issued our second small grants request for proposal and selected and issued those grants. And we also launched our COVID-19 emergency response efforts. And Trina spoke a bit about that, the rapid response work we did, trying to link students with volunteer opportunities in community, work with our community partners to identify where there was burning need, where we can leverage our resources to help support their efforts to stabilize their communities. We also did work around facilitating some virtual discussions around COVID and how communities are responding to the crisis. In April, we launched our, again, the Engage virtual discussions, as I mentioned. And in August, and in fact, we just finalized it a couple of weeks ago, the Engage team and our Employment Equity Learning Community Project funded by Kellogg, we developed a blueprint for employment equity for the city of Detroit. And we're very excited about that. And hopefully at some point we'll share that with you, and maybe we can all rally around those recommendations and strategies that we outlined in that document. Next slide. So, what we're trying to illustrate with this timeline and kind of highlighting these milestones in our work is that we want to share with you and communicate the fact that we've been engaging in communities well before the initiative started, and that we've been working hard to advance the mission of the School of Social Work, just as many of you are doing and have been doing for decades and throughout your careers. Now, through Engage, we are working on creating mechanisms to connect the work that you're doing, the work that we're doing, the work that students are doing, the work that staff of our school are doing, and to create mechanisms that lift that work up and encourage more of it. We also are trying to communicate and share with you that we are in service to and collaborating with units internal to the School of Social Work and across the university. And that's important. Instead of operating in a silo, engagement in particular is very integral to everything that the school does. And it's integral to the mission of service and impact and social change of the school. We also want to communicate that we have deep connections with community groups and community-led initiatives, and that our work is impacting the community with the employment equity blueprint for change in the city of Detroit, and with the capacity building forum and the building a network report that we were instrumental in developing. Our work is also meant to deeply impact some of the entrenched social problems and issues facing communities across the state of Michigan. And as we've illustrated in Detroit, since that's in our backyard, we care very deeply about Detroit. And something else, the fact that we work very intimately and closely with philanthropy, that's a very important point that I wanted to lift to your attention. Instead of applying for grants and getting money to implement our vision, we work very hard to collaborate with our philanthropy partners, to think together and strategize solutions for the city and for the communities that we impact. So we value that, and in our mind's eye, that's one of the ways that as a school we can work to sustain our community engagement over time, is those very strategic partnerships with philanthropy. So now our current work, and I talked to you about the small grant award. That's one of our signature initiatives. And in our first year, I just wanted to highlight which faculty were awarded grants. We had Shauna Lee and Joyce Lee, and they were working on promoting infant health and well-being. We had Barry Checkaway receive a small grant, and his focus was on youth civic engagement and forging a partnership with a new organization in the city of Detroit. We had Odessa Gonzalez Benson work with a community partner to examine immigrant and refugee-run organizations and extract lessons learned from those institutions. And we had Jacqueline Hawkins and Daisha Price focus on supporting the well-being of the Cody Rouge community by forging partnerships with a collective of organizations. Now this year, this past March, James Blackburn and Angie Perrone were awarded a grant to focus on the Aging Network in Detroit. Beth Glover Reed is leading an initiative in partnership with an organization in Detroit that supports LGBTQ senior housing project. Katie Richard Schuster is expanding youth voice and focusing on developing an quality assessment tools for youth development programs and building those in partnership with youth groups in the city. And Daisha Price is working with a center in Detroit to increase access for Black transgender individuals in Detroit. So you see, these faculty are doing amazing work in the city. And our small grants are intended to help facilitate that work. And we also support them in making connections with community groups and other partners to help advance their work and broaden their reach in terms of their interest areas and the research that they are trying to advance. So I'll move it on to Aisha, who can speak more to our virtual discussions.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So, my primary role is leading up the virtual discussions, which has been a series of equity-based conversations on kind of various social justice issues. I try my best to really identify kind of pertinent social justice issues or movements happening. So that might be the fight for clean water, food sovereignty, the uprising for Black lives. And then I'll contact prominent activists in the field and community leaders that I know are working on these issues. And I ask them to join us as guests. So, we really believe that co-leading these sessions with different units helps to make these conversations just more content rich and diverse. So we love to collaborate with other units. Examples of this have been a session we did with Michigan Medicine to showcase a social work, a medical student initiative to treat COVID-19 patients, the Ginsberg Center on community engagement, most recently CASC on racial equity and youth organizing, among others. So these sessions are open to the public and university at large, but School of Social Work students do receive field credit for attending. We then have debrief follow-up conversations, which are more focused on, discussing collective action around the given topic that was discussed. And we also want to elicit information from students on what are they doing around these issues in communities, because many of them are doing amazing things. And we like to just have a place where they can share that. So in the chat, I'm going to ask that a link be dropped, which is an archive to all our past sessions, and also a list of all of our upcoming sessions. And we really also, we want to encourage instructors to think about how they can utilize these recordings in their courses and how they can connect it to course content. I'm utilizing them in my 560 course and really connecting it to community organizing and mobilization, which has been really great. So please feel free to contact us if you want to link to any of the recordings. And also please feel free to contact me if you have ideas about topics. We're always free to, collaborate with others, or if you know of an activist who you think should be showcased in a discussion. So next up, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the student showcase and field placements. So we became an approved field site last semester, or I'm sorry, not last semester. I believe it was the very end of 2019. As Sonia kind of showed on our timeline. And so we had the pleasure of having Jamie join us, and most recently having Blake join us. One of the things that we like to do is we also like to refer agencies that we know of who are interested in becoming field sites to the Office of Field Education, which has been great. And I think it's allowed the field office to kind of broaden its network in that way. Then we like to also have an event called a student showcase where we want to uplift student work in communities. And that's not just exclusive to field work. It could be any work that they are doing in communities in general. We had one in the fall 2019 semester that was focused on work happening in Detroit. That's where this picture is from, where we had a few students just kind of present some of the volunteer work they were doing, field work they were doing. And we are planning an upcoming one, which will not be geographically focused on any area, but it's really to uplift and celebrate how students have overcome a lot this semester. And in spite of that, they still continue to give back to communities. So please look out for that, and we'll be sharing some communications around it soon.
Thank you, Aisha. I will now talk a little bit about rapid response. The biggest example that happened this summer is as kind of the stay in place order was done by the governor, and many students who were in field could no longer go to their field sites. We were asked to kind of think through what are some volunteer opportunities that might be able to be done for field credit. So working with the field office, working with Ginsburg, we kind of put together a list of volunteer opportunities. That list is still there, but it's not as immediately needful as when it was first started in April. But what happened is every time students came to one of our webinars or volunteered at one of those sites and documented their hours, they talked to their field instructor, were able to get that through. So kind of being able to try to quickly get that process going, hopefully was helpful to field and was something that we were happy to do. Similarly, this idea of collaborating units, you already heard a lot of things. So the small grants was a partnership with the Detroit Urban Research Center at the School of Public Policy. We, again, rather than creating a whole small grants program of our own, we kind of tagged along with their small grants program, but put some additional funding to make sure that School of Social Work faculty always got selected every year. Right now, our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is trying to think about internal communications. And so we're part of that committee trying to help think through what might be helpful for that. Because we had been working in Detroit, we're trying to see, well, what's happening in Washtenaw. We realized that faculty on our team and staff from CASC were actually already part of a racial equity initiative documenting engagement that was happening in Washtenaw. So rather than recreating something ourselves, we said, well, we'll partner with them to make sure that we highlight the work they're doing and then create a common database with the one that we're creating for Detroit and the rest of the state. And so just showing that we're willing to collaborate, we're willing to be nimble and try to respond when necessary. Those are sort of things that we do. So now I'll pass it on to Fatima to talk about a couple of our signature projects.
Hi, everybody. Good evening to all of you and for those who are joining us through the recording. So our last thing that we're doing in our current work, and it sounds like we have a lot of work, and we do, which is we're all happy and we're all very proud of the work that we do. And the last thing that I want to talk about is our signature project with community partners. And one of them that I'm going to kind of highlight to all of you is our work with the Employment Equity Learning Community, which is a group of over 45 stakeholders in Detroit. And we all convene on a monthly basis to work on employment equity for Detroiters and really not just how to solve employment equity, but even what is employment equity. What's nice about these projects that we do with the community is that we are bringing in social work values, social work skills, social work expertise into the communities. And really the communities have recognized that and look to us for that expertise, really. And so, for example, some of the things that we've done around employment equity is we've created a working definition. We've created obviously our theory of change also, but we've done things like gap analyses. We've done evaluative efforts in order to really understand what it is that's causing, what are the barriers that are actually not allowing Detroiters to achieve equity. We also did an ecosystem map, for example, and we worked with different evaluators with that. And like Sonia mentioned earlier, is we've at the end of this year, and we're really proud of this, like we said, is we've created a blueprint for employment equity that we hope to publish soon and really spread to the community at large, because it was work that was done through this convening process, through collaboration. We all know as social workers, all these important things, but this was a culmination of all of that, and now we're ready to get it out to the community. Hopefully the next year coming forward with this group, we're going to be working on some signature projects and continue our learning. We've brought all sorts of different people for in this employment equity learning community, from people that work in the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department at the state, from people in the city, from activists on the ground. That's one thing that we pride ourselves into, is that we're really bringing in government officials along with grassroots organization leaders. And this is critical. We know as social workers that it's critical, but sometimes in communities at large, or with, when you're working with CEOs of different organizations, sometimes they don't recognize it's critical. But us coming in as U of M School of Social Work saying that these are people that need to be at the table makes a difference and helps our communities become more equitable in the way that we all hope to be. So, we hope them to be. So that's just one example of a signature project and the work that we do. And I am going to turn it over next to Trina, and we are going to start a small group discussion. You're muted, Trina. You're muted.
Thank you. I knew I'd do that at least once. Okay, so of course we wanted to share with you what we're doing, so you can get an idea of the breadth, but we also want to hear from you. So we're going to have this as an open conversation. So one, if there's any questions you have of what we presented so far, but even better, if there's ideas of what you'd like us to be doing in addition, or ways that you'd like to engage, or that you are engaging, I think this is a time to kind of open it up for conversation. So for those of you who are here, if you want to unmute yourself and either ask a question or share something you're aware of, or give an idea of something else that you think might be helpful as we all work together toward this engagement goal.
Trina?
Oh, so Lynn has asked a question. Can you say a few words about the outcomes of a few of the small grants and your view of the future of that program? So I'm seeing if anyone's on. So no one's on here who did a small grant, I think. Sonia, do you want to say a little bit about that? I know that, well, I'll say what's going forward, and then if you could say a little bit about some outcomes that we're aware of. We just asked them to do some reports the last month or so, so we're kind of getting that information. But what we're thinking about doing is once every year is when we do this partnership with the DURC. So every year as they do their process, which I believe is in, when does that happen? Is it in the fall? Yeah, I think it's in the fall. And so what we've been doing, and so in the fall semester, we have what we called kind of open forums. And so we kind of met with people to say, oh, if you're interested in working in Detroit, but you don't know who you want to work with, you don't know quite what you want to do, talk to us and we can brainstorm with you. And so we've connected a lot of people with organizations that they weren't already aware of. And then we work and help them put together the 2-page proposal that goes to the DURC, which is in public health. And then we go through their kind of vetting process. So we're on the committee, but also community-based partners that they have and folks from public health. And we kind of give feedback and then we award. So every fall, we kind of invite people to brainstorm and to apply. And then we put them through the DRC process, and then they have a year to actually work out the grant. So we're kind of doing that on a yearly basis. And Sonia, you want to say a little bit something about those reports we just got about some of the outcomes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in all cases, the faculty that have connected to community partners, those relationships are continuing. And because the grants are small, we make sure that the project design and what they're proposing yields a tangible output or impact, or like an output or a product that we could look to at the end of that small grant period. In almost all cases, faculty are continuing to work with the partners, and the work that we supported is supports a step of that process of a longer term relationship and set of goals that the faculty member has with the partner organizations. And I think that we've done a good job in a few of the cases of actually linking the faculty to the partner that they forged the new relationship with, that is now an ongoing partnership with that community partner.
But to give, can you want to give an example? You want me to give like one example just to kind of put some concrete things about it?
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
So for example, Barry Checkaway for years have been doing his youth engagement partnership, but usually it was suburban partners that had their own funding, but they weren't able to continue doing things in Detroit because the community-based partners in Detroit didn't always have the money to kind of put their match kind of dollars in. And so when we linked up with Sarah Metro, which is kind of a employment equity kind of community outreach partner that's in Southwest Detroit, they said, we'd love to work with you, but we don't have the money to put in. So we allowed the funding to go to give the money so that there could be a Detroit-based partner and not just the suburban partners.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did what he was already doing or had been doing, but he was able to do it with a new partnership with Detroit that didn't have the funding to go through.
And then to add on that, Trina, that partner, Sarah Metro, adopted that methodology and is continuing to engage their youth in those kinds of dialogues. And their youth are getting more active in policy advocacy for Detroit public schools.
So that's just one specific example.
Great example. Thank you.
All right. And Brad, did you want to say something? I see or have heard that your hand is up. Are you still
Sorry.
there? Okay.
No,
good.
my hand was up way early on one of those the opening questions because I couldn't figure out how to do the avatar. So I wanted to at least raise my hand on one of the icebreakers. I'm just glad to hear about this work that's going on. I think it's terrific. So thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no. Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're super excited about this. I mean, we're like an assembly of like super enthusiastic, committed social justice activists and warriors all together working to advance the mission of the school and have an impact in communities. So I don't think I've ever been part of a team that I've enjoyed working with so much.
Very cool. And earlier, Charles was on. It doesn't seem like he's on anymore, but we can't quite call it a signature project because it hasn't been funded yet. But I mean, he has been working really hard in his church community in this COVID environment to provide meals and to deliver medicines. And he's applied for several NIH grants. He's a testing site. And so we provided both volunteers and just kind of support as he applies for grants and things so that that work could continue. Because obviously sometimes you pour blood, sweat, and tears and things to try to get things going, and having someone to support that to keep it going could be helpful. If one of the grants gets funded, obviously it'd be even better to be able to continue some of that work. That's another example of some of the things we're doing. We're also helping write a case study so that, to document some of the things that have happened, because sometimes you're so busy doing the work, you don't have time to actually document what's happened and to try to promote it in different ways so people recognize, what's been happening on the ground. So even though he's no longer here, that's another example. It's not quite a signature project because it's work he's doing, not so much work that we've done in partnership along the whole time. But there's definitely going to be opportunity, I think, in the future to continue to work with him.
And if I can jump in, we did actually really help with getting student volunteers to Charles's church at the start of the pandemic.
Yep.
He developed this whole outreach strategy of he needed volunteers to get some basic supplies and check on basic needs of residents attending the church. And Engage was able to kind of deploy students to help him with that effort, which was great. And they got field credit for it.
Yep, absolutely. So just one example.
I want to say how much the field opportunities that in your collaboration with our own field education program, that meant a lot to many students over the summer. Students who wanted to do something didn't know how to begin to locate opportunities, and in some cases even do some in-person work, which there was a lot of bereft students who missed doing, they came here to learn and hands-on skills and working with people. So from my point of view, that was a great success, that project.
Thank you. And actually, Aisha, if you want to say a little bit, one of our first guest speakers was Deepa Iyer, and she actually talked a lot about how you can rise to the occasion during times of crisis. And again, it wasn't so much our thoughts, ideas, but actually pointing to someone who nationally thinks about this and allowing students to kind of see what their role is and how they could be helpful. If you want to say a little more about that, Aisha, you can.
Yeah, so Deepa Iyer, she she's a nationally renowned scholar and activist and attorney, and she did this research paper on the social change roles that most people assume during times of crisis, and thinking about how your role changes and how you can utilize the strengths of that role and the support that you need. So we saw her article published online, and we asked her, would she come and do that exercise with our participants on a virtual discussion? And I think that it was it really helped people kind of conceptualize what they need from themselves and from others to move forward during this time. So it was great.
And again, that was like end of April. So
Yeah.
Really when everybody was literally just trying to figure stuff out. And so having someone to kind of talk through and say what other people are experiencing nationally just kind of brought some, I don't know, just a touch point, which I think was helpful.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always work out that perfectly, but when it does, it's really nice.
Yeah. And I've used it in my class and students love it. Thinking about your social change role and how it evolves during times of crisis. So it's another resource for instructors that might be on this call. That was really great.
And I think something that also stands out, at least with our virtual discussions, is, we center it towards students and having students join. But ironically, I feel like sometimes I'm the most motivated out of those sessions, out of anybody. And it really is something that should be broadcasted to even faculty and anybody that really, because we're bringing in amazing activists, experts in their fields, discussing on the ground real live issues and how they're making a difference, and how we're and the questions always center around social work values and social work ethics, and we're bringing it back to our own ethics and our own principles that we stand for. So it's not something that's just student related, but it's also very clearly related to, within our own faculty as well.
And again, this is the time for you guys to give feedback to us. So if there's something that you think you'd like to also raise another point. I know, Carla, if you're still there, you do lots of things in the community as well. So just figuring out how we can work together to kind of raise the profile of what the school is doing, as well as to continue to expand and have new and innovative approaches. So anyone who wants to talk about what they're doing as well, I'd love to hear that. I didn't mean to call you out, Carla, but if there's something you want to say, you're welcome to say it.
No, but I'm glad to hear about sort of the range of things and have a chance to think about, where things might connect.
Yeah. And I don't know if with the Jewish Community Leadership Program, do you guys have, I know that you have the Sukkot and some of those things that you do every year, but are there kind of engagement things as well? And how does that work? How do you kind of bring partners in and have students engage with kind of what's going on in the larger community?
Yeah, no, we actually do quite a bit, and I'm trying to figure out how to adjust this year, but we do site visits that bring us out into the community, lots of institutions, including groups in Detroit doing intergroup work. We do a lot of public programs to try and engage the community. Yeah, so those are kind of the main things, and sometimes they're more. Yeah, the students are focused on sort of trying to sort of create things that will engage different communities, both in the university and beyond.
Yeah.
Could I ask Carla a question?
Of course.
Sorry, Carla. But I know you have great engagement because I often see people from the community who are at the JCLP events and so on. So, and I also know you have a close working relationship with many Jewish focused agencies which serve as field placements for our students. So how integral are those field placements to the overall community engagement of JCLP, or do you see it as two separate strands, the field placement and then the engagement in initiatives with the broader Jewish community in Southeast Michigan?
No, they're definitely connected. So, there are certain people that we work with, like the head of Jewish Family Service in Metro Detroit, who we always have play students with him, but also, think about more broadly and understanding the community and in terms of outreach. It's just part of the contribution of our students to a lot of these agencies, part of being known in the community. And then we often draw on those agencies to come back and engage with us. So I think it's mutually beneficial. In fact, just in Ann Arbor, the head of the Federation here suggested that we write an article about benefit of the students placed in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw agencies to the community and the community to the students. So like trying to sort of highlight that synergy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe before you have the article done, you could do a poster at the showcase or something. It's kind of as a baby step.
No, I mean, you know what? There is a lot actually. Paige, who works with me, has wanted to do something to present sort of the way that the community works. And I'll say this about our program compared to, I think, sort of parallels in the Jewish kind of communal leadership field that I share with the students all the time, that the advantage we have is being here versus, say, New York or Los Angeles. At a number of levels, but it matters. It matters to the community that these students are here, and it matters to the students that they have the support and feel the engagement of the community and feel their investment in them. That's really important. And there are possibilities here. One thing, when we one of the site visits that we try and do often is to Access, right, which is not a Jewish agency, and that's always with the hope of like, can we create more possibilities of connection? I've really wanted to place a student there because I think there's something about sort of being a community that wants to maintain its distinctiveness in the broader whole and also faces sort of pushback in various ways. So, and what it means to like thrive and take it, especially with social services, what it means to be part sort of in the ways that those things get funded through the government and sort of to work together on that. And that's something the Jewish community and the Arab communities in Southeast Michigan actually do together. So we'd love to get our students like more engaged in that space. So that, to me, that's like the big, and I'll say one more thing about it. It's a slow process, but I'm pushing Jewish studies to sort of create a center that would focus more on that kind of community work, like thinking about intergroup work, both studies, but active stuff in the community that could bring some of the different communities together. Because we have a new faculty member whose focus is on the way that Muslim communities in the Middle East have understood sort of Zionism in Israel, sort of as an intellectual project. So he's a great partner to have, just sort of in something that would be both sort of academically oriented and community oriented towards looking at Judaism and Islam together.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm serious, if you're at our showcase, you want to, have a preliminary version of that, that's definitely something we'd love for you guys to be able to promote.
Hi, Trina and team. I just want to thank you all for sharing more about the wonderful work that you're doing in Detroit. Really appreciate, all of the connections that you are developing and advancing. And one thing that really stands out to me as I hear you speak about these initiatives that I just think is unique and really important and aligns with, very much what I feel we should be doing as social work researchers is really working to build capacity in the Detroit community so that we're really supporting folks to realize their vision for Detroit and to advance the ideas that folks in the community feel are necessary to work towards equity in their community. And I just was wondering if you all are in any way kind of documenting that capacity building piece and or the ways in which the engage work is really advancing capacity in the community. I just, that really struck to me as I was hearing you all talk about these wonderful initiatives. And so just wondered if you could speak more about that at all.
Anyone can jump in, but I'll just say really quickly. I mean, obviously the stuff that's funded is easy to document. So the employment equity learning community, we're documenting all along the way. But another one that isn't funded yet, but we think is really exciting, and I'll let Fatima or Sonia jump in a second, but we're also kind of equitable development, because I'll give my take on it and then everybody else can jump in. But I went to an event at Taubman, which is kind of, our urban planning school. And so there's people from the city, and they're talking about all these students and all these great things that were happening to Detroit, but there's people from New York and New Orleans, and I forgot the other place, but almost no one from Detroit, right? And then literally the very next day, I went to another, I guess, workshop that was put on by a community-based group. And they were saying how hard it is to get funding, how they have all these plans, but they can't get anything done. And there were like two people that were both events. So myself and the program officer from the Ford Foundation, and then one of our graduates, right? But everybody else were completely different audiences, even though they were both talking about equitable development, right? And so almost kind of in not so much anger, but just, it's sad that the two groups weren't talking to each other. And so myself and Sonia and Fatima actually invited folks from urban planning, people we know in the community who do kind of work with CDFIs and kind of work on economic development at the community level, say, what can we do about this? So we invited people who are doing this work in other cities. We kind of have met, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 times. We don't have it all figured out yet. We don't have funding, but we kind of said, well, this is another spot where the University of Michigan could have an impact, but maybe right now the people aren't always talking at the right level. We've also connected, with Lynn's help, folks that are doing some of the bringing in kind of the laundry work at some of the medical centers with community-based groups, like, what can our role be? How can we get jobs? Making that connection. And again, it may not all end up in some perfectly neat, funded project with, an article at the end, but at least starting the conversation and getting people to talk to one another and seeing if we can be solutionaries even in this area. And I know Fatima and Sonia, if you want to jump in, but that's another one that is not funded, but we are trying to document and trying to figure out, are there ways to talk about equitable development, as now a lot of people say they want to have racial equity, but they haven't done it very well in the past. So how can we help people live up to their ideals?
Mm-hmm. And I think Trina is raising a good point about our role as convener, neutral convener for community groups, for activists, for the city, for private developers and corporations. Our stake in the game is a better society for all, right? So we have power as a convener, a neutral convener, and that is very valuable and very appreciated by the community groups that we work with. If a Detroit Future City convenes on a question, there's going to be concern or questions about motivation or who's benefiting or who's getting the money or what have you. But for the university to be a convener, that's a perfect role for the community. For the university.
And I know Addie, you asked also about capacity building. Sonia and Trina, probably you should mention the Skillman work and the capacity, the building work that happened with the Skillman Foundation there too.
Yeah, and Addie, a book came out of that one, you know. Yeah, that was a 10-year-long process where we were embedded as a technical assistance provider in 6 neighborhoods in Detroit, and we developed deep personal relationships with leaders in those neighborhoods over a 10-year period of time. And we were their support engine to help them think through their ideas and develop plans of action and link them to resources where they could live out their dreams in their communities. So that was really exciting work. And then we worked with a foundation, and we were a technical assistance provider to the foundation to support their the development of their theory of change. They established this, they had this idea of developing a comprehensive community change initiative, and then they lived it out, and they put their millions of their dollars behind it over a 10-year period of time in these 6 neighborhoods. So we, at the end of we supported them along the way to conceptualize their work and to help with implementation of their work. But at the end of the day, we also helped evaluate that community change initiative. So we were a partner along the way, and then we were an evaluation partner at the end of that experience.
And the one thing that's exciting about that work in particular is 3 of those executive directors of those 3 neighborhoods are strong and vibrant now. I mean, they're doing, I mean, they're not just funded by Skillman, they're funded by like 6 or 7. Everybody wants to work with them now because they got such a jump start. And so we still, talk to them, run into them at meetings, are helpful as we can, but it's like they're now thriving, right? And so it's not all 6, but I mean, at least half of them continue to do very, very good work. And the other 3 are still around, but they just didn't quite get the bounce. But to know that, people who started out on their first job and now are like literally, getting money from GM and getting money from foundations and getting money from all sorts of places because they found a way to kind of bring all of their passion and energy in a way that it works for their community. So staying in touch with them, even though we're not technically, in that role anymore, has been really exciting, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, Trina and I, we're just talking about the work that we've been engaged in. Faculty across the school are doing as deep and as impactful work in Detroit and in other communities across Michigan and across the nation. And what we want to do with Engage is lift up that work and inventory it. And Trina's going to be talking a little bit about our inventorying project. We need to continue to capture the good work that's happening through the school and connect it. It always surprises me, and it's a little bit frustrating when you're working in a neighborhood and then your colleague is also working in that neighborhood and you guys don't know about each other. And then it's just imagine if projects that were in play in the city or in neighborhoods that we were working were connected. Just imagine how we could coordinate resources and activities towards a greater impact in that neighborhood. So that's another one of our objectives, especially an objective we hope to achieve through the inventorying project, is to connect the work and kind of look at where there's nodes of activity and strengthen those nodes and connect those players and those faculty and those projects and connect it to the community needs towards greater impact. So Trina, I don't know if you want to transition to our closing and talk a little bit about our next steps.
Sure. Great transition. Next steps. Thank you, Fatima, for getting that back up. So we actually were going to have this fireside chat in April in person, and obviously that didn't happen. And now we're doing it now, virtual. And so obviously some of the plans that we had aren't going to happen quite the way that we had hoped, but we still want to do this inventorying. And so we'll send this out obviously after this session, but this is a link. I already said that we have a lot of the Washtenaw ones because we're working with Sue Ann Savis and Katie Richard Schuster and people who are working in Washtenaw. And we want any project that a faculty is doing that they consider to be community engagement. And we do give some examples, but really, if you're engaging with a partner that's external to the school, put it in. and then we'll figure out, how to categorize it and document it and put it all together. But this is the link. And what the way we want you to do it is for each project. So if you're working on 2 projects, then fill it out twice, and saying I'm working in this community with this project, and then I'm working in the second project with this partner. And so we want to be able to, ideally, if it's geographically focused, to map it, but definitely at least have a listing of as many things as faculty share with us, and then also connect it to field sites, and then just look at that first, just kind of visually and conceptually. But hopefully, if there are 50 field students, 2 faculty projects, and a signature initiative in Brightmoor, then maybe once a year we have all the Brightmoor people come together to talk and see where they can work with one another and be helpful to one another, at least be aware of one another. If we have similarly students, faculty, places throughout the university in Southwest Detroit, have all those people come together, once or twice a year to talk through what's working, what's not, how can we help one another, how can we support one another. And it'll just be kind of what naturally happens at first, but hopefully, as these conversations happen, year after year, as field students come and go, and as faculty, starting in projects, they could be more intentional and more strategic moving forward. So what we're going to do, you're going to hear from us. You're going to get this link. So if you have a project that you're doing, this is where you can document it. And then again, anything new and interesting you want to promote, contact us. So we have kind of a news feed on our webpage. I know that Lisa Raycraft loves to get good stories, even if it's not at a point where it's super polished and well stated, but just you want to let us know something's happening, or even if you have one picture or something like that, we can kind of work, because we're getting better at communications, so work at promoting what's going on. So obviously there's like the kind of formal relationships, things that are ongoing, but if there's just something that you want to let us know about, an event or a project or an idea, we can maybe talk through it and again help promote. That's kind of a role we want to be able to play. As Aisha mentioned, we want to have our second student showcase in December, and it won't be just focused on Detroit. It's going to be all the great work our students are doing. As soon as we have the date, which will be probably the next week or so, and you start to see that, please promote it and share the word with your students. And again, it's field, it's volunteer, it's through group projects, whatever it is that is happening that you'd like to have a student do a presentation on, or just have a blurb about. We're going to have another student showcase virtually in December. And again, there'll be an email that summarizes all of these things. So we're putting links in the chat, but if you're not getting it and can't save it, we're going to send out a follow-up email that summarizes the highlights of what we said today. As I mentioned before, we aren't doing a personal training, but there is a public engagement faculty fellowship program. Applications are out now. They're due December 1st. So through the Office of Academic Innovation, we actually worked with Elise as she put these things together. So again, it's a form of collaboration, but it's a way that if you want to do more of this as an individual, or faculty who are interested but just don't know where to start, this might be a good program to apply for. So before we go into the final slide, anybody else on the team who wants to bring up something that I missed?
Trina, could I just jump in and
Please.
say there's loads of good suggestions in the chat, not only the links you're putting in that I know a lot of us would like to keep track of, but also some ideas from Brad and Addie and others for connecting, and Carla. So just to keep track of it would be great. And I know those chats are often elusive. They seem to go into the vapor somewhere.
Yep, we always save the chats, and we will definitely pull together. But let's just go through. So so Carla said that being a neutral convener can be important. So thank you. Brad says he wants to know more about what his colleagues are doing. And so we didn't mention this. We should, Jamie, I should say this. We had our first newsletter. We're going to try to do one a month. And what we're doing with that newsletter is we're promoting what students are doing. We're promoting one faculty project that's going on. And we're kind of, I guess, promoting our upcoming webinars that are showing up. And so that's a place, one at a time you can learn. But as we have those in the newsletter, we'll also be compiling them on our webpage and working with Lisa to make sure they're promoted social media in other ways. So keep your eye out for those, Brad, because we will keep those going. And then how can we learn from one another and share best practices? Again, one of the things that are happening in the debrief after the webinars, which I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work, but it's happening really well, is some of our students, either before they came here as students or in their field or just in their interest, there are tons of things they're actively working on like right now. And so we have so much back and forth that we're learning from one another, particularly on the water thing. That wasn't my area of expertise, but there were a couple of students who knew everything about, wastewater management and dealing with, and all these sort of things. Like, wow, that's great. And so just having people talk to one another and share resources around themes is at least what we're trying to do around the virtual conversations. But if there are other things that you think we should try to do some conversations about, we're open. Literally, we're open to be helpful in any way that we can. And then Addie says she wants to talk about rural engagement in rural areas in Michigan. So definitely anything you're already doing, talk about in the link. But if there are things that you'd like to expand to, actually you can lead it, but we could just promote and convene, that sort of thing. If that's something you want to do. Did I miss anything else? Public engagement application. Okay, very good. Thank you though for referring. We will save the chat, but getting those things out right now is also good. Okay, anybody on the team, anything I missed? Anything else you want to say before we do our final slide?
I just want to add that in this December student showcase, although it's not that we're going to exclusively try to focus on this, we do really want to focus, we do want to uplift and showcase students who have been helping communities respond to this pandemic. So if you know of students, please encourage them to reach out to us so that we can contact them and ask them to talk about their work during the showcase.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us tonight. We appreciate the conversation that we've had. This is our webpage. If you are looking for it or can't find it, even though if you just put community engagement on our school webpage, you'll find it that way too. The survey that we mentioned is going to be sent out, but here's the link here as well. And you can email each of us individually, but if you just want to send something out to the group, we're SSW Community Engagement at umich.edu. So that's all I got. If anybody else wants to make a final comment or thought, but we really do appreciate you joining us today. And just this forced us to kind of think through how we want to talk about engage. So hopefully you can tell others that ask, or obviously it's recorded. So if someone wants to watch this later, they can. So however you hear about this, or if you want to reach out to us, we want to continue the conversation.
I'm just going to add that we're going to have a second fireside chat later this month. I don't have the exact date right in my head right now, later in November. And Joe Ryan's going to be talking about his engaged work with Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in the child welfare area. And we have the Director of Children's Services coming. So it's very much engaged work, but it's a very interesting complement to this presentation, because we're talking here about engagement with the public sector on a statewide basis. Another really important part of engagement, and we're talking about engagement with the public sector that's struggling because it's under federal court orders to improve the services to children in the state of Michigan, and how our university partnership can help them use data to move forward in terms of better services and better policies for kids. So it's a great compliment, and it happens just by chance to extend the engaged research theme. So hope to see some of you there. And
Michelle said it's November 19th.
November 19th. Thank you so much, Michelle. That's a Thursday before Thanksgiving week. And so thanks to everyone, to the whole team. What a great team the Engage Center has. And thank you very much for your work and your presentation today.
Well, thank you for allowing us to do this. And we will continue to work on that strategic goal.